In August 1944, following an Allied bombing raid on Rüsselsheim, Germany, several captured U.S. airmen were marched through the town. Civilians, fueled by anger and wartime propaganda, attacked the prisoners with stones, clubs, and hammers. 6 airmen were killed in what became known as the Rüsselsheim Massacre. After Germany's surrender, those responsible were arrested and tried by a United States military tribunal. Among them were Joseph Hartgen, Philipp Gutlich, and Johannes Oper, civilians found guilty of war crimes. Their trials and executions marked some of the earliest applications of post-war military justice against civilian perpetrators. Joseph Hartkin, a German civilian, was executed in 1945 for his involvement in one of the most notorious civilian attacks on Allied airmen during the war, the Rüsselsheim Massacre. On August 26, 1944, following an American bombing raid on Rüsselsheim, several captured United States airmen were forced to march through the town streets. As they passed, a crowd of civilians gathered. What began as shouting quickly turned violent. Led by Hartkin, members of the crowd attacked the prisoners using improvised weapons. Stones, clubs, and hammers were used as the airmen were beaten in full public view. By the time the assault ended, 6 American prisoners of war were dead. After Germany's surrender, Allied investigators reopened the case. Hartkin and other participants were arrested and brought before a United States military tribunal. Multiple witnesses identified Hartkin as one of the organizers of the attack, describing how he encouraged the crowd and pushed the violence forward. The court found him guilty of war crimes, ruling that the victims were protected prisoners of war under international law. On November 10, 1945, Joseph Hartkin was executed by hanging. His death became one of the earliest post-war punishments imposed on a civilian for atrocities committed against Allied airmen, setting a precedent that civilian status did not shield perpetrators from accountability under the laws of war. Philipp Gutlich was executed in November 1945 at Brussels prison. He had been convicted by a United States military tribunal for his involvement in the Rüsselsheim Massacre, during which 6 American airmen were killed by a civilian mob. The court found that Gutlich played an active role in the attack, which violated the protections granted to prisoners of war under international law. His conviction placed him among the earliest civilians in Germany held legally responsible for wartime violence against captured Allied personnel. As the sentence was carried out, Gutlich observed a brief religious ritual. Before being led to the execution site, he kissed a small Bible and the crucifix presented by a priest. The gesture was quiet and measured, offering no explanation of motive or remorse. Shortly afterward, the execution was completed. Gutlich's death remains part of a broader historical debate surrounding post-war justice, whether such punishments represented lawful accountability under the laws of war, or reflected the lingering force of retribution in the aftermath of global conflict. Johannes Oper was executed by hanging at Brussels prison in November 1945. He had been convicted by a United States military tribunal for his involvement in the Rüsselsheim Massacre. On August 26, 1944, following an American bombing raid on Rüsselsheim, 8 captured U.S. airmen were forced to march through the city streets. A civilian mob incited by anger and wartime propaganda attacked them with stones, clubs, and hammers. 6 airmen were killed in what became known as the Rüsselsheim Massacre. Allied authorities identified Johannes Oper as one of the participants who actively assaulted the prisoners. After Germany's surrender, he was tried and found guilty of war crimes, held directly responsible for the deaths of the airmen. His execution served as a clear demonstration that civilian involvement in violence against prisoners of war would be prosecuted under international law. The case highlights the application of military justice to civilians in the immediate post-war period and the principle that wartime law applied even after hostilities had ended. Their cases demonstrate the reach of Allied military tribunals in holding people accountable for wartime violence even after hostilities had ended. Today, these events remain part of the historical record, showing how post-war justice sought to enforce the laws of war and establish accountability for civilians who crossed those lines.